welcome Stacy Gough, who's the Chief of Healthcare Professions from Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells NHS Trust today to talk about the role of the Chief of Healthcare Professions in an acute trust. So over to you, Stacy.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it. The introduction and the invitation, and good afternoon to everybody. It's lovely to be involved, as I already am in your wider community, but also to actually get the opportunity to speak from my perspective on your behalf. And really about how I can learn from all of our conversations about delivering a better role to promote the healthcare sciences across the NHS, our region, and of course, I suppose my focus should be on my organisation as well. So first of all, I would really value those that feel comfortable and confident enough to ask questions, pass comments, and do speak freely. And whilst I appreciate it is being recorded, I do think that the value of hearing voices, even if cameras are off, is really powerful. Also, I think it allows us to reflect on the conversation that I'm having and really begin to change the narrative around the way that we work together and the way that we think, because it's that perspective that helps us and that reflection that guides us and how we improve ourselves. So please, I can't see if you do put your hands up, but Mark said he will kindly be the MC for the next few minutes. So Mark, that'd be great if you can kind of shout out if somebody's raising a hand or wants to come in. So this afternoon, I just want to take a few minutes to really kind of give you my perspective, but then change really rapidly to how my perspective is actually not as important as yours. Mine is just the mouthpiece by which we raise our profile, innovate the sciences, and also evolve the services that we provide. So, as Mark's kindly said, I am the Chief of Healthcare Professions in an acute trust, and that is, as you can see from the screen, Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells. It's a brand new role. Well, it's not really in the sense of that it's now over 8 months old, but in the newest sense for this trust, it is a brand new position. And so consequently, everybody is still beginning to understand what the role is and how it fits into the organisation. And probably in the trusts that you work in, there is possibly a similar role to this one. And it varies actually from organisation to organisation. In fact, within our region, within the Southeast, I've not met somebody who has the title that I have, that has the same role that I have. So consequently, it does mean that there is a different an alternate view in each organisation, but I think fundamentally the role is fairly similar. I'll just give you an overview really of what I think that my role is. So I'm hoping you can all hear me, because despite me trying, it is quite noisy where I am, forgive me. Interestingly, I think you may have just flicked to the different screen. So let's go again. Mark, can you see my second slide? What is my role?
Yeah, I can see that now, Stacey.
That's all right, yeah. In flicking the screen, I'd managed to switch off my PowerPoint. So what is my role? So what do I think I do? Well, I think I do a series of things, and that is, I think that I connect people. And certainly from that professional ideals and perspectives, so from healthcare sciences, biomedical sciences, to our allied health professions, to our corporate, to our executive roles, but also beyond the scope of the organisation and in a wider position like we are today. I think that I spend a lot of time cheerleading, not necessarily doing the stretch in the photograph, but I do a lot of cheerleading and raising the profile and visibility of healthcare sciences and talking openly about what it is and what the roles are. I also think that I try to use as many different tools by which we can connect, celebrate, and shout and raise the profile and visibility of those roles, including social media, as you can see on the right, organisational communication, but also a broader perspective, such as engagement with charity, private sectors, academia. So I think my role is a series of different things. And I think many people would probably describe my role, if they were to look at it from a different perspective, so not healthcare or the NHS, as an influencer. Because sometimes that is what I feel that I do. I move between influencing people and liaising with people. And probably a bit of both is how I try and create the space to be the chief of healthcare professions. But in simple terms, the role is to be able to be the advocate for our professional groups and our staff. Whilst my focus will always be on patient care, it isn't my first focus. And that is about how we integrate all of our services and our people to deliver best practice and the greatest success for patient services. The bottom picture is it's meant to be blurry, but the idea is it shows you that there's a whole heap of professional groups that in MTW, my role is the advocate for. And those mix between allied health professions, healthcare sciences, and a whole cohort of people that don't quite fit in a group. So I've actually kind of changed the narrative around. And instead of everybody saying around me, doctors, nurses, and others, I say I talk for everybody else that isn't a doctor or a nurse. And as I've just said at the beginning and the outset of the few minutes, it really is interesting how this role is quite different in each organisation. So please do go. If you don't know them, please do investigate who is occupying that role within your organisation and how it differs somewhat maybe from mine. So forgive me if it is slightly different from your organisation. So talking about how in Acute Trust, I am that liaison officer, I am that influencer. If I look from the perspective of this pyramid, and forgive me for using MTWs, but it's symbolic as well as constructive. If I'm looking from the executive perspective, which is the top of the triangle, I'm thinking about how the executive strategy will then pan out and operate across the whole of the establishment and the workforce. And some of the key themes that you'll recognise and have echoed across your strategic themes within your organisation are those on the left. So patient experience, patient safety and how clinical effectiveness is delivered, how the patients access our services, how we operate within a system and how we create partnerships, how we are sustainable, not just in our career pathways, but also in our services, in our equipment, and also in our green agenda. And then latterly, people. Now, those are not prioritized or hierarchically numbered, but certainly I think from my perspective, all of those are important, but it's the people bit that I'm most focused on. So from an executive and trust board perspective, my role is to help that board and that executive structure deliver that strategy and make sure I am the mouthpiece and the professional guide by which we create a really valuable communication tool and action. How do we create that action? But as you can imagine, if we're thinking from the executive and trust boards at the top of the triangle, forgive me of the symbol, and about a downward cascade, again, forgive the directional limit that gives me. What it does make us think about is how do we achieve that, and how are we trying to echo all this strategy down to a whole cohort of different professions and different people with different perspectives and different cultures. And so I suppose this is where there's a little bit of interaction, and Mark, I may need your help here. But my next point is, what's missing? What's missing between getting that communication and that drive for that strategy from the executive and corporate space into the heartbeat of work and the way that we deliver our care? So what are we missing by not facilitating to the best of our abilities from executive and trust board down? And I suppose if I was to say to people now that are listening, is there anything that you think I'm trying to hark towards here that's missing between that strategic plan and how we deliver it and communicate it through to the workforce? Any thoughts, anybody?
Right, thank you, Stacey. We'll open the floor up then for thoughts and comments?
Thank you, Mark.
I mean, my initial reflection is, the strategy and from the executives is always done at that very high level, isn't it? So it's to me, I'm not sure whether this is missing or not, but the really crucial thing is getting the connection then between that and what people are doing on the ground.
Exactly.
And presumably, Stacey, your part of your role is doing that.
Is exactly. Yeah, it is. See, as Mark captured it in a nutshell, and I suppose that's what I'm trying to say, is actually the communication for something like our strategy isn't one way. It certainly shouldn't be a pyramid, although that's not me ripping down the structure that MTW has. But I think what it does show, symbolically, even not if intentional, that we are sending a message one way. And I think that's something that I'd really like to hear everybody's thoughts on and develop some conversations around. So what are we really missing? What are we missing between creating the space that strategy can be brought into practice and practice can affect strategy? And I suppose this is where I talk about my role. And I see myself, as I've said, as a connector, a liaison person, a social kind of media influencer and cheerleader, but ultimately as a translator, is that I translate the information from both sides of that pyramid. And here I've turned it upside down to kind of be symbolic about how we do that. And I engage with as many of those professional groups and individuals as I can to make sure that that communication happens organically and repeatedly, and that we are effective in the way that we create a culture of communication to ensure that we are meeting the strategic aims, but also probably the other way around, influencing those aims and the strategy if it isn't where we feel we need it to be. So I suppose.
Comments, Stacey, in the chat.
Great.
Here.
Absolutely.
So
please.
Sania Khan from Maidstone's come in to echo the point on communication. Sania, I don't know if you want to expand on that at all, or you're happy.
Put her under pressure.
Hi,
Sania.
Hi, Stacey. Just what Stacey was saying, that it's really important and to be the voice of maybe the lower grades in the trust that don't have that ability to communicate and get their message heard.
Thank you, Sania, and absolutely. I suppose it goes back to my front slide. What is my role? And it's that kind of listening to all areas of the business and being able to translate it into something that is usable, but also gets to where it needs to be. Mark, did you say there was another comment?
There is another comment from Claire O'Brien, who has a lead for healthcare science in their organisation. I don't know, Claire, if you want to expand on your comment.
I feel I need to tread carefully in how I word this, but essentially, so we have a lead for healthcare science for our trust. They are part of the exec team. They do zero for their role, absolutely zero. They didn't even know what professions come under healthcare science. How do I get them to do their job?
Wow, I mean, and this is what we'll talk about. So Claire, come back to me at the end of this, and if I've not answered it or given you some tools to be able to achieve that, then first of all, I've failed in my presentation, but also secondly, I'll openly invite a connection with you and anybody listening today about how I can support you, because I don't think it is a restrictive boundary about the way that we operate as an organisation. I think it's far greater than that. And I'll come to some of those thoughts in a moment. So great to hear. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Mark, was there anything else, or?
That's everything for the moment.
Brilliant. Perfect. So
thanks, Stacey.
I suppose continuing with that theme, some of the big areas that the translation piece, I would suggest, kind of relies upon me and similar roles, is to be able to make sure those latter 2 points are made, that the influence is seen across the whole of the workforce, and we are influencing in every direction. And also that when we do influence, we bring about the impact that we want to be able to see and or feel. So an example would be that we feel that something isn't working effectively within our space of work. And I'm not going to give an example because it will only hone in on one area and may alienate somebody else. But we are feeling that something isn't working very well in an area of our work. How do we create an opportunity to be able to influence that process? And then how do we display the impact that we've created? So in many respects, whether it's positive or negative, and this is something where, we've got to be really brave about the way that we step forward, but being able to say, this wasn't working well. You've listened to me and I've influenced for us to try something new. And this is the impact that I've found, even if it wasn't what I'd hoped for. Nevertheless, we've learnt the lesson. And you'll have all heard the phrase umpteen times, I'm sure, but we failed fast and we've moved on. And there's no hangover associated with that. And so that's something very much that I feel in the role at MTW at the moment, that I'm enabling as much as possible, that it's okay for us to graze our knees. You've got to fall over a few times to be able to learn how to walk properly and not trip over your own feet. And there are so many different metaphors for that, aren't there, in life? And I also think that it's key that when we do have a fall over, that we're able to stand up again, and that we're able to say, that's okay. It's not always going to work perfectly every time, because if there was a solution that existed and there was one way of doing things, it would already exist. So it's acceptable for us to do that. And we almost plan to fail, because that's how you learn a lesson. But I think the biggest thing for me right now, and I kind of really welcome everybody's thoughts around this, is how do we get to the point that we influence effectively to put us in a position to be able to bring about an impact and a change? And I think traditionally there has been a disconnect between how we are operating in our clinical areas or non-clinical areas, and how the trust, the organisation, the body by which we are working or employed by is seeing and valuing the work that we do. So I suppose the next few minutes are about how we might think about improving that, and how I see my communication and the culture that I embody, create, drive enables us to be doing that innovation, that influence, and the impact. So if I'd kind of move forward, there are three key areas that I think that there is an opportunity for my role to be able to support everybody that works in the healthcare science space. So first of all, it's about the culture and creating a culture that enables people to thrive at work. There are times in our careers where we will move through being at work, doing our job and going home, because life is always more important than work. But what we often forget when we say that is that the communities that we work in and the people that we serve, it is about life. Because when we need these services, it very often is a life and limb or health-threatening condition. So actually, what I want us to be able to do is, even when we are just surviving at work and not thriving, we're still thinking about delivering the best that we can, because it could be one of ours. It could be us. So that's the first culture. It's always being mindful about the way that we operate. And even if we're just surviving at work and we're not thriving, it should still be a level where we're emotionally attached. And I think that's not something I have to kind of talk too much around, because I think most of us understand the value and the duty that we all feel we have by operating and working in the NHS. I've listed a whole series of big themes for me in creating that culture. And what I haven't done is kind of introduce you a little bit about my background, because actually I don't always think it's relevant. It might be different, but it's about listening to what we need now. But one of the most powerful things I've seen since arriving in the NHS, and I didn't work for the NHS previous to this, and I've never worked in the NHS. Well, I have worked in the NHS, but not worked in the NHS for a long, long time, which I consider as never, because it's fundamentally changed, is trust. Is that actually a lot of the culture and the environment we operate is not necessarily centered around the team trusting each other, that we start from a standpoint of trust, that we trust in each other's ability, we trust in each other's well-being and well-meaning focus and the way that we deliver our job. And I think that's really powerful because it connects with two key things. It connects with the emotive part of the job that we do, and all of us care. That's why we work in healthcare. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it. I appreciate that, but it's about caring. And secondly, not just the emotional side, it's also about trusting that we can deliver the best that we can based on evidence, so that we are responsible for the job that we deliver and the role that we play. And if we start from that foundation, what it does mean is that we can erode a lot of the barriers that we may see already operating within such a hierarchical system. And whilst hierarchy is important, it shouldn't be the way we deliver services around healthcare. So that's one area that I think it's about creating a space of trust. I think if you have a space of trust, we can collaborate effectively. And I think this faculty today shows how we do that. I also think that we also have to collaborate beyond the boundaries which we normally work. And that means not just in the lab, not just in the department, not just in the division or the directorate that we work, but also beyond the organisation, beyond the NHS, and beyond our profession. Because if we don't collaborate outwards, it means that we lose the ability to be able to diversify. And as you know, change in healthcare is regular and often and frequent. So first of all, it's right culturally that we are looking at different ways to diversify, and we're not frightened of it. But more importantly, we actively seek areas for collaboration because we know we don't have all the answers. And as somebody who's been qualified clinically for a long time now, it's really disappointing when you realize that you're never going to know everything. But actually, as you get more mature and experienced in both life and your clinical role, or non-clinical role, you appreciate that it's okay to not know everything, and that you're secure in the fact that you can't possibly. So I think that is really key. And I think sometimes the structure in which we operate doesn't facilitate or empower us to collaborate more effectively. So that's one thing I feel that culturally I can certainly promote, and would encourage you all, as I'm sure you do, to do that. And I think the biggest thing then that following on from trust and collaboration is actually empowering those that we work with, alongside and for, to make that change and not be scared of the consequence. I do see that there is an inherent fear around stepping out, about pushing boundaries, about recognizing that you might fall over in trying to find a new route, in trying to seek a new opportunity. And that if we do fall over and we don't pick people back up, or celebrate the fact that we've learned something from that, within sensible reason, and I'll come back to that, I think we will never therefore thrive at work. We will lose trust, we won't collaborate effectively, and we will then limit ourselves in engaging and empowering the rest of our workforce and those that come after us. All of those lead to a space where actually we're not delivering best care, we're not operating at the top of our license, and we are failing to provide our community and patients with the best care that we can. So for me, the culture and thriving at work is key. I'll move on to the second point, our professional role. So looking at us as a profession, and looking at you as a profession and your role, I think it's also key that we recognise and talk openly about our responsibility, our accountability, and also about assuring ourselves and those around us. We shouldn't be scared of taking responsibility. As I've just described, that falling over and standing up is okay. I also think that we should be accountable for that. It's okay to fall over. It's okay to try something. It's okay to fail, and it's okay to win. And actually, it's our responsibility to do that. The third thing around accountability is about recognizing that if we want to hold the professional roles that we do and engage and grow our career ourselves, as well as those around us, we also have to be held to account. And that's a safe place to work. It's not a frightening place to work, because if we know what our boundaries are, if we know what our regulations are, if we know what we should be doing, then we can use them as the base for the evidence by which we'll grow. Without them, and without recognizing that, it means that we aren't responsible. We fear accountability and being assured. And what we do is reassure rather than assure those people we work around us. And that's how we lose credibility. but it takes quite a bit of confidence. And I think, again, it's something that happens as we kind of appreciate our life experience and our lessons that we learn as we get things wrong through our career, that we can tell our story, we can seek challenge without fear, and we are courageous about the way that we do that. And I think it's these kind of networks and speaking openly about how we feel within our culture that enables our professions to grow. I put a series of bits of things down under the professional role, but it's those responsibilities, accountabilities, and being assured will give us the confidence to step out and seek challenge to grow so that we can actually influence and create impact in the role that we have. The final one for me is business principles. And traditionally, we know that the NHS has very much operated in almost a competitive style. And maybe in the future with the new government, we might see some changes back towards that competitive nature. I'm not convinced, and that's not a political statement, I'm not convinced that being in competition will raise our game. I think the space that we operate now is moving towards the right space, but I think our business principles from our clinicians are not quite there yet. I don't think as a business savvy individual, we promote our profession and what we can bring to the game and what we can bring to the trust or the organisation in a way that's really the most effective. I think we probably don't step forward and promote ourselves and the roles that we do and the value we could add. I don't think we're visible in our profiles necessarily, and we don't therefore grow the impact and influence for us and our talent and the talent in the future. And so consequently, I think we probably could do some learning around the way that we understand business. So how are we productive? How do we become more efficient? How do we create money for the business so that that money can be invested back in us? We can't naively continue to limit the way that we operate, saying that a business case without a solution will give us the answer to the problem. We have to be innovative about the gift within our own reach, and that sometimes we have to think it like business to be able to deliver within a business strategy. And I think probably from the healthcare sciences perspective and from our allied health professions, there's more we could do around engaging in principles of business to grow the services, the culture, and our profession in order to do so. So those are the three big themes that I really talk around and think about. And I suppose the biggest thing that I would say is the lens by which I hope I can reflect and listen is that I need you to ask me, I need you to show me, I need you to tell me, but more importantly, I need us to work together to be able to bring about an improvement, a growth, or a maintenance of what we currently deliver in order to be able to create a culture that is positive for healthcare sciences. It grows the professions and highlights what we can achieve and brings in business. And finally, we need to be in those conversations about business, and we need to step into a space that we don't always feel comfortable and grow our understanding of it. And I think maybe there are times that we probably as healthcare scientists need to be moving out of our professional role into the academic space, into the corporate, into the executive space, into those roles we don't traditionally go into, so that we can allow others to influence and impact decision making within our organisations. So, Mark, I've come to the end of me talking about my role. I haven't given you any job description. I haven't really told you the framework by which I operate, but what I've shown is you some of the themes that I think are really important to create the space to grow healthcare sciences, commit to a change in the way that we deliver, and make sure I'm listening to all of you and you're listening to each other in order to create that space. I really value taking any questions or allowing Mark to take over and listen in for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.